I'll call the meeting to order. Municipal Council of the District of Lunenburg on Tuesday, March the 10th. It's now 6 o'clock and we will begin our meeting. We would like to call this meeting to order and begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and we are happy to share the land with them. Are there any announcements, acknowledgements, or recognitions that councillors would like to bring? Councillor Brooks.
I just wanted to mention an event that happened this weekend in Riverport. The mayor and I were both at it, and it was the Repair Cafe, which happened in Riverport. And it was a super cool event. It was really neat. People were there doing everything from electronics to carpentry repair to a lot of seamstresses, and people had a lot of stuff repaired. It's a group that's going to be traveling around the whole community and sort of trying to do it once a month. But if you get an opportunity to go, I would say definitely go check it out. It was just great energy, and I think a lot of people thinking about getting a little extra mileage out of their products. This is a great way to do it. So yeah, that's my props to the Repair Cafe. Go check it out.
Councillor Smith.
Thanks. With Heritage in the news a lot this month, and with International Women's Day just this past Sunday, I wanted to take a minute to express my gratitude for the women who run the Parkdale Maplewood Community Museum. Curator Donna Ehrenberg, who's been there 25 years, assisted by Suzanne Isaacs, and Wendy Look, who has served for treasurer for at least 30 years, maybe 40. I need to get that confirmed. But during their season, which begins on May 1st, Donna and Suzanne welcome school groups, tourists, researchers. They host history talks, workshops, and weekly socials, which are really popular, and the group has become very tight-knit. It's very special to see. They also help out with many genealogy searches in person and virtually, and I know of at least 2 artists this year who have sought out the resources of the museum. And because this team is so welcoming and knowledgeable, our stories make their way into the broader culture. The staff and supporters also work very hard to fundraise, and they don't get a lot of provincial funding. And unfortunately, they've lost a little this year. But in keeping with the theme of International Women's Day, which is Give to Gain this year, I invite everyone to give generously to the work of this museum, since we get so much in return. And beyond individual donations, you can become a member, visit often, book their meeting rooms, attend programming, and just share your connection with this special place with others, because it helps to not take it for granted.
Councillor Oikel.
Yes, I'd like to announce that I have a conflict of interest for 11.1.4.
And I would like to acknowledge the Bridgewater plant manager of our Michelin plant, Rita Casey, who was recognized last week for one of the 25 most powerful women in Atlantic Canada. So our congratulations go to her, and her recognition of her 36-year career with Michelin. She started on the plant floor and worked her way through the system, department manager, special projects manager in Oklahoma, and then came home to Nova Scotia to manage the Bridgewater plant. I've been fortunate enough to know her for, I think, 35 of those 36 years. So it was really fun to be one of the guests there last week and celebrate with her. It was a fabulous night for her and her family, as well as recognition for Michelin. Any other acknowledgements anyone wants to make? We'll move then. We do allocate time for public input, and I know tonight we have some of our Planning Advisory Committee members with us, and we appreciate their first of all, their volunteer effort on behalf of the citizens of the District of Lunenburg, but also that they came tonight. I know the planning staff were careful to make sure they knew of tonight and to hear the discussion around the second draft of the municipal planning strategy. This is a big undertaking, which is now just almost a year since we relaunched the process, and we are now embarking on the next phase and hope we can conclude that later this year. So thank you for coming, and if you do have comments you want to make, there will be an opportunity during the municipal planning strategy to speak, but if there's other things you want to speak about, you're welcome to come to the podium. You're here to listen, so that's okay. But we do encourage the public that may be listening to think about participating in our meeting and coming to the beginning at each of our meetings. We allow time for public input. So please use that as you feel you would like to, either to pass out compliments. We're always happy for those, but we also are quite willing to hear the things that you're not happy about. And we try to do our best at dealing with those issues and helping to resolve issues that are problematic to people. We do have an agenda before us, and there are a couple of items that we want to take off the agenda before we approve it. 7.2, the Community Hub Commercial Kitchen Equipment Purchase. There's an issue with some of the numbers on that, so we're going to take that off. And we'll remove the under in-camera session 14.1, which is contract negotiations under section 22(2)E of the MGA, Municipal Government Act. Those two that doesn't have complete information for tonight, so we'll deal with that at another time. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda as circulated? Councillor Bell and seconded by Councillor Burns. All in favor, raise your hands, please. Motion is carried unanimously. We have minutes of February the 24th. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll approve those minutes as circulated. We have no business arising from the minutes, and we will move to item 7, which is the awarding of tenders for RFPs, and 7.1, and that is the award of RFP 2025-05403, which is the design and build of Saw Pit Wharf demolition, construction of new wharf with floating dock system, kayak launch, and boat launch upgrades. And we'll turn it over to Maria Butts to lead us with this tender document.
Thank you, and good evening. The municipality requested proposals from design builders to demolish the existing wharf at Saw Pit, which is currently closed, and undertake design work for the construction of a new wharf, along with a new and expanded floating dock system, accessible kayak launch, and as well to design and carry out upgrades to the existing concrete boat launch that's at Saw Pit Wharf now. The RFP was issued on February 5th and was posted for 3 weeks and closed on the 26th. 2 proposals were received and accepted and evaluated by a staff committee. Of the 2 proposals submitted, Eagle Beach Contractors Limited received the highest overall ranking and has been identified as the proponent that will provide best value to the municipality for the services we have identified in the design build RFP. Allowance for the cost of the project is set to be included in the approved 26-27 capital budget with allocated funding of $2 million. Council did offer pre-budget approval for this project on November 25th, which allowed staff to go ahead and issue the RFP for the services in advance of the official approval of the capital budget for 26-27. The projected cost, including a contingency for the proponent to carry out the works in the RFP, excluding HST, is $1,482,720, and the project is expected to be completed within this budget. So staff are here today recommending that council award the work to Eagle Beach Contractors Limited.
Thank you, Ms. Butts. Maybe someone could put the motion on the floor, and then we can have questions and discussion around the motion. Deputy Mayor Vino.
Thank you. To Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that Municipal Council award RFP 2025-05-403 design build saw pit wharf demolition, construction of new wharf with floating dock system, kayak launch, and boat launch upgrades to Eagle Beach Contractors Limited for an amount up to $1,482,720, including a 20% contingency and excluding HST, as pre-approved in the 2026-2027 capital budget, and I so move.
Counselor Bell, you're seconding the motion. Thank you. Just maybe before, while councilors are maybe getting their question, could you just comment on the 20% contingency, which we usually have 10% or 15%?
Yes, so the 20% contingency, in this case, we have a design build RFP, so alongside demolition, the proponent, we've gave them parameters for all the design work up front to provide a submission and a cost for us to evaluate. We do know that there's always the chance that we're going to encounter unforeseen circumstances, given that it is a RFP and we haven't had robust design works and site investigations. So there is the case where under construction, which is included in this cost for the proponent to build the designed features, that we could encounter scenarios where we may need to account for things like maybe unsuitable material through excavation. So we'd like to have some contingency there, as well as contingency on the design side of things, because we provided a set of parameters, but we are going to be working with the proponent through the design process alongside our Saw Pit Wharf Committee. And there could be the case that there is some requests from us to adjust some of those components over the course of the coming weeks as we design the final product for the site. So that's why we have allowed for a 20% contingency in this case for the project.
Okay, questions from council. Councilor Brooks.
Thank you, Maria. Can you just tell us a little bit about Eagle Beach at all, where they're from and any little history, just for the record?
Sure. So Eagle Beach Contractors Limited, they are a company that has existed in Nova Scotia for over 40 years. So this is the heart and soul of their business is in a marine construction and working on projects just like this. They are a family-run company, so it is started with the original founder, Peter Webbink, who is an engineer, and now it is his sons that are also engineers alongside, and they do design construction work across the province. They are based out of Halifax. They do have a laydown yard in Martins River. If you've driven alongside from Mahone Bay out through to Martins River, you may see the yard just before Shore Cycle. They've got a laydown yard there, and they do a lot of work right across the coast along the province and a lot in the local area as well.
Councilor Oikel.
Yes, thank you for explaining about the 20% contingency, because that was one of my questions as well. I'm just wondering about the kayak launch. Is it going to be an accessible kayak launch like the one that's at Miller Peace Park?
Yes, that is correct.
Other questions? Don't see any. Are all those in favor of accepting the motion as presented? Moved and seconded. All those, motion is carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is exciting to get this work started. I know Deputy Mayor Vino will be very happy to see this work begin, but we're not have the delay of summer by speeding the process up with the pre-approval. So that's great to have that underway. We will move along. We have no presentations tonight beyond our staff presentations. No correspondence to consider. We have recommendations from committees and boards, which is from the Finance Committee, and this would have been from the Finance Committee meeting last week. And our Deputy CAO is going to lead us, or is it a B?
I can happily just give a quick
the
summary.
synopsis.
So we received a notice from Clean Foundation that they'd be increasing the water supply administration fee and also the clean energy financing administration fee. Staff advised that while the clean energy financing does require some technical information to help residents navigate so that they get the proper cost and debt servicing ratio. There isn't the same support provided for the water supply program, so staff are recommending we bring that in-house to save residents money. And so the motion is there to proceed with the increase in fees for the clean energy financing where they're covered by energy savings, and then to bring the administration of the water supply program in-house.
Thank you. Those that may be listening that want to hear the details of the discussion from council, the recording from March 3rd will provide more details on that. That would have been our Finance Committee meeting. So the motion, would someone put the motion on the floor for discussion, please? Councillor Brooks.
To Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that the municipal council accept the recommendation of the Finance Committee and increase the administrative fees to $1,400 per participant for the Clean Energy Financing Program and water supply upgrade effective April 1, 2026. I so move.
And a seconder for the motion, seconded by Councillor Moore. Is there any discussion, further discussion? Councillor Oikel.
Yeah, I just want, just the way that it's here and it's read, it sounds like that, is it not Clean Energy Financing that wants the administration fee raised? Right, just that the way it's, the way it sounds like we are the ones that want it to be raised. I just wanted to make sure that people understand that are listening, that it isn't, as a council, we're not raising the fee, but that Clean Energy is for the program. And unfortunately, if we don't do it, then the program will be kaput, right?
Sure, yeah,
Right,
that's
yeah,
fair to communicate.
yeah.
Effectively, it's council has to change a policy in order to increase that fee. So council is raising the fee, but the reason is the provider is increasing those costs. And the design of the program is that those costs are recovered from the homeowner.
I think it's on the record now, so your point is well taken, Councillor Oikel. Any other questions? All those, Councillor Burns.
Through the chair to Alex, I was just wondering, just for the record, for anyone listening tonight, if you could comment on the gap between the fee is raising now, but we're bringing it in-house in November, so there will be a period in which there is a slightly higher fee. Can you just comment on why we did that, so people understand?
Yes, specifically on the water supply program, the fee will go up. Clean Foundation has given that notice. For an interim period, they'll be administering that program, but we'll bring it in-house, and when we bring it in-house, we can bring the cost back down to where it was. So you're right, there is a period of time where the water supply financing fee will be higher, and then it will come back down. I believe it's November. Yeah.
Councillor Smith.
Councillor Smith.
Can you also, through the chair to Alex, could you also repeat what happens to people who are in the queue right now? People who have their applications in, are they under the old fee or the new fee?
I'll actually look to Abhi and Elena to answer the specifics on that one.
Thanks.
If I may, through your worship to Councillor Smith, anyone who has a signed agreement from the district of Lunenburg through CEF or the Clean Energy Financing Organization would have an agreement in place. So that agreement would state how much the fee is and how long the loan term is. So right now, anyone who has a signed agreement, none of their terms are changing. This would only be for agreements that would be signed after April the 1st.
Okay. Any other questions? Because there's two motions here, one related to the clean energy financing and the other one to the water program. So all those in favor signify by raising their hands. Motion is carried unanimously. Could we have the second motion, Councillor Moore, presented? Thank you.
To Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that municipal council accept the recommendation of the Finance Committee and approve transitioning administration of the water supply upgrade program from Clean Foundation to in-house delivery by the municipality of the District of Lunenburg, effective November 1st, 2026.
And a seconder for the motion, please. Seconded by Councillor Hoobley. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Motion is carried unanimously. We will then move to staff reports, planning and development, municipal planning strategy, and land use bylaw, draft number 2. Who's leading us? Reed? Mr. Shepherd will start, filled in by all the other elves that are working with him. I won't call him Santa Claus. So just for council, while they're getting set up, we are doing public input directly after the presentation. So council can hold their questions and comments till after we have any public input, and we'll have plenty of time for that afterwards. So all set, Mr. Shepherd?
Yep, all good to go. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Reed Shepherd, Deputy Director of Planning and Development Services. I'm joined by my colleagues, Ala Gindi, Planner 2, Rosemary Young, Planner 1, and Anna Giblin, Planner 1 as well. So this is the team who have been working on the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw for the unzoned parts of the municipality. So tonight we're going to give a bit of background about this and mostly focus on the draft number 2, which has been released to the public in the last couple of weeks into council. But tonight serves as kind of the formal introduction to the public, and we'll mostly focus on walking you through in the public the changes that have been made in the second draft since the first draft, which was about a year ago now. And then we'll just touch on at the end on what's coming next in terms of some of that public engagement. I'll jump to the next slide there. All right, so just a refresher on how we got here. This is in response to a provincial requirement, legislation passed in 2018 that required all municipalities to have all lands under municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw, basically requiring that all lands be zoned in a municipality. That zoning has to meet certain requirements the province has, such as the statements of provincial interest, as well as what are called minimum planning requirements. And there are other additional topics as well, such as environmental protection, heritage, and transportation. At this point, this has been changing in the past year or so, but the District of Lunenburg is the last municipality in the province to meet this, will be the last municipality in the requirement to meet this requirement. Just in terms of where we are in this process, there will be more public engagement coming up after this, and then the hope would be that there's an approvals process that occurs kind of spring, summer of this year. So the origin of that legislation the province passed really lies within the Municipal Government Act. So that's where it states some of those requirements that each municipality have a municipal planning strategy and that lands be zoned through that process. So this is all building upon the legislation that's outlined in the Municipal Government Act. This is something that we often talk about in public engagement, but just in terms of what zoning consists of, it's really about regulating the different land uses that can occur on different properties through dividing them into things called zones. Often those zones divide up land uses into certain types, such as residential, commercial, industrial, conservation, and then each zone would have certain required uses or permitted uses and regulations that may pertain to it. Zoning is a tool, and that tool can be used to help communities. It can help them grow in a planned manner, predictable manner. It can help protect properties from changes. It gives the ability for people to have a say in how their community grows, and allows communities to direct growth and development in ways that that they want to see, rather than having that change occur around them without an opportunity to have a say in it. So the statements of provincial interest, this plan, I would say in terms of where the ones that play more into this, agricultural land and drinking water are probably the two kind of more prominent requirements in this plan as it pertains to this municipality. Flood risk areas is a topic that the province is largely dealing with. Infrastructure and housing, of course, are required, but those are kind of more something you'd see in more of an urban area. This is one of the things that we really try to ensure that we're very clear when we're doing public engagement and talking with members of the public, and that's how will this affect people with existing properties and existing uses. And the very straightforward answer to that is that anything that exists currently and leading up into this plan being enforced does not need to change. Those would be considered, well, a lot of people would consider the term grandfathered. And so those uses or buildings or whatever they might be, if the new rules say that you can't do that, it does not mean that you're telling someone you have to change what you're doing already. What's in this draft as well, it's additional flexibility beyond what normal plans have that allows people to do even more flexibility in terms of something that might be considered grandfathered as well. So all of these plans and the way that these are structured, it's really forward thinking. It's about what happens in the future. So if you're creating a new lot, if you're doing a new use, or you're building a new building, that's when we would look to these rules to see what's allowed and not allowed. But in terms of people saying, what are you saying I need to change on my property that I'm doing today? The answer is nothing. They can continue to do what they're doing on their properties. And in most cases, they can actually expand those things, even if those aren't normally allowed in that zone. Those can be expanded, rebuilt, fixed, those types of things without any, amendments or anything like that. So I'm going to start turning it over to my colleagues, and they're going to start getting into those topics and that kind of walk through some of at least the main changes that have occurred between the draft 1 and the draft 2.
Okay, so we're going to start with zoning. The draft 1 did propose a number of zones, so a significant change to draft 2 is reducing the number of zones from 17 to 9 zones. A couple other notable changes is that the Lakeshore Residential Zone was removed along with all future use zones, for example, the Recreational Commercial Zone or the Light or Heavy Industrial Zone or the General Commercial Zone, so all those zones have been removed. As well as the hamlet zones, those have also been removed, but what have been replaced with one rural village zone, which is applied to only 3 communities. So these are the 9 zones proposed in draft number 2, along with the zone symbol on the right-hand side there. And then this is the proposed zone map. So it's just a brief overview of what those zones look like. At the public engagement sessions, we're going to have large printed out maps with inset maps as well, so community members will be able to look at their properties closely and provide comment on what is proposed for their properties. So starting with the rural zones, the rural general zone, this would be the most permissive zone in terms of regulating land uses. And it's intended to maintain rural character and support the continuation of a wide range of rural activities. And this zone is applied to the greatest amount of lands in the municipality. So no major changes have happened from draft 1 to draft 2 in regard to this zone. The rural agricultural potential zone is basically the same as the rural general in terms of permitted uses. But the big difference is that this zone would place limits on subdivision to help direct residential development away from valuable agricultural areas. The zone would be applied to large areas of high quality agricultural lands, so the class 3 soils. And the main difference between draft 1 and draft 2 is that more lands were added to this zone to capture large areas of class 3 soils that were not previously included in draft 1. The rural residential zone, that zone's purpose is to accommodate low-density residential development.
and it would limit certain types of uses that may cause nuisances in residential neighborhoods. The major change is that since the Lakeshore residential zone was removed, the rural residential zone was expanded upon to include some dense residential lakeshore areas that were previously included in the Lakeshore zone in Draft 1. And then the rural village zone. So the purpose of this zone is to support the continuation of established communities by allowing for a diverse range of uses and services. The big change from Draft 1 is that the hamlet zones were both removed and then replaced with this village zone. And this village zone is only applied now to 3 communities, so New Germany, La Have, and Petite Riviere. So as for growth area zones, we've got the mixed-use serviced zone. So this zone is intended to support the growth of denser mixed-use areas, and it's applied to the growth centers around Cookville and Osprey Village area. So no major changes have happened since Draft 1. And then on to environmental and recreational zones. So the Protected Watershed 1 zone, the purpose of this zone is to protect drinking water supplies. And it's applied to the lands around Dares and Oakland Lake, and no major changes have happened since Draft 1. And then the Protected Watershed 2 zone. So this zone is also intended to protect drinking water supplies and would be applied to the larger watershed areas of Heb, Melipsegate, and Minimimkeek lakes. While this zone is applied to privately owned properties, it still allows for low-density residential development. So no major changes for this zone either from Draft 1 to Draft 2. It's important to note that these 2 zones are consistent with the Statement of Provincial Interest on Drinking Water. And then on to the Recreation and Park Zone. So this zone is intended to maintain and support the continuation of public recreational areas. And the zone would be applied to existing municipal and provincial parks, and no major changes have been made to this zone. And then lastly, the conservation zone, which is meant to protect lands for conservation purposes and would be applied to existing protected lands as well as lands under the Beaches Act. And again, no major changes from Draft 1 to Draft 2. So that kind of is a brief summary of all the zones that are proposed in Draft 2. And then now we're going to just get into the topic-specific areas of where major changes or changes in general have happened since Draft 1 and Draft 2. So we're going to start with agriculture and rural lands. So livestock. So Draft 1 categorized livestock to apply setbacks for new barns and manure storage facilities. And it also involved placing limits on the number of farm animals based on property size. So council directed staff to remove all livestock-related regulations, including the regulation of backyard chickens. So Draft 2 does not place any limits on livestock operations or require setbacks for livestock or manure-related structures. And now looking at the setbacks for new development from existing farming operations. So Draft 1 included a setback of 150 meters for new residential and institutional uses from intensive livestock operations. There was also an option through site plan approval if the distance of that setback could not be met. Council directed staff to maintain this approach of having a setback for new development from existing farms, but to make sure that houses that are associated with farm properties do not need to meet that setback. So in Draft 2, this approach is maintained. However, the setback was reduced to 100 meters and exempts farm-related houses from needing to meet the setback distance. And then agricultural land protection, which is a statement of provincial interest. So Draft 1 proposed a rural agricultural potential zone to protect valuable agricultural lands from being developed. The zone was applied to lands larger than 4 hectares, located outside of already developed areas or watershed protection areas, and consisted of at least 60% Class 3 soils. Council indicated that the formula for determining the lands included in the agricultural zone should be adjusted to include large areas of Class 3 soils that were not included in Draft 1. So draft 2 maintains the same approach used in draft 1 to identify the land in the agricultural zone. However, additional lands that have more than 4 hectares of continuous class 3 soil that were not previously captured were added to the zone.
So now we will transition to the draft 2 changes that relate to economic development. First, starting with campgrounds and RV parks. Draft 1 included a commercial recreation zone to be applied to future recreational land uses such as campgrounds and RV parks. Instead, in alignment with Council's direction, Draft 2 includes policies and regulations that would permit campgrounds and RV parks by development agreement in most zones. With regards to home-based businesses, Draft 1 included regulations for home-based businesses in the Hamlet Residential Zone, the Rural Residential Zone, and the Lakeshore Residential Zone. There were a total of 8 types of regulations, including a requirement for public road frontage and a maximum number of external employees, among others. Draft 2 would only regulate home-based businesses in the Rural Residential Zone. The regulations would be reduced to 2 types, a list of non-permitted uses, and a maximum gross floor area. Home-based businesses would be permitted throughout the rest of the municipality as a commercial use. Draft 1 included general signage provisions for all signage in the municipality, as well as specific signage requirements for the mixed-use service zone, the Hamlet Center Zone, and the Hamlet Residential Zone. Draft 2 contains no signage requirements. Now we will highlight the changes between Draft 1 and Draft 2 that pertain to housing and flexible living options. So Draft 1 included policies and regulations stating that a recreational vehicle could be lived in for 30 days before a development permit would be needed. There was also a requirement for an adequate septic system after 30 days. Council directed staff to regulate recreational vehicles to a minimal extent by removing the requirement for the approved septic system and requiring a development permit after at least 60 days. Draft 2 includes policy language that more clearly states Council's intention to allow people to live in RVs and other forms of alternative housing. Draft 2 also includes regulations that would allow recreational vehicles to be lived in for up to 90 days before requiring a development permit. Individuals would still be allowed to inhabit a recreational vehicle after 90 days. They would just need to obtain a development permit in order to do so. Draft 1 permitted tiny houses, but did not include specific policies or regulations on them. Council directed staff to treat tiny houses as dwelling units, allowing them as of right wherever residential uses are permitted. Draft 2 includes policy language stating that Council will treat tiny houses as dwellings and permit them as of right in zones that permit residential uses. The land use bylaw includes a definition of tiny houses and regulations that would treat them the same as other dwelling units.
So now we're moving to regulations pertaining protection of inland waters and natural areas. So environmental protection of water bodies includes several tools such as setbacks and vegetated buffers. Setbacks and buffers are important because they help protect the health of lakes, rivers, and other watercourses. In Draft 1, the proposed regulations apply to all inland water bodies and included a 30-meter setback and a 15-meter vegetated buffer. Council directed staff to reduce the setback from 30 meters to 20 meters while maintaining the 15-meter vegetative buffer. In addition to the 20-meter setback and 15-meter vegetative buffer around lakes and rivers, Draft 2 also includes a built-in flexibility that allow existing undersized lots to still build even if they do not meet the setback requirements, as long as they are being sited at the maximum distance it can be from the ordinary higher watermark. For inland wetlands, in Draft 1, there was a proposed 30-meter setback and buffer around wetlands to help protect these sensitive ecosystems from nearby development. Following the review of Draft 1, council directed staff to reduce the setback and buffer from 30 meters to 20 meters. This means that draft 2 aligns with council's direction. So inland wetlands protection now consists of a 20-meter setback and buffer, while also including a built-in flexibility to existing undersized lots to be developable if they cannot meet the setback requirements. And in addition to that, since we know that the provincial mapping can be inconsistent at times, there is also the ability to remove that regulations if a property owner provides proof that the wetland is absent. Now we're moving to open space and parkland dedication. So parkland dedication and cash in lieu are requirements in the subdivision bylaw that ensures new developments contribute to the creation and/or maintenance of public parks and recreational spaces within the municipality. Draft 1 initially proposed an increase to parkland dedication and cash in lieu contributions. However, council requested staff to bring back what is already in effect in terms of draft 2. So in alignment with council's direction, draft 2 now maintains the current parkland dedication requirements that already exist within the subdivision bylaw. This means that subdivisions will continue to provide either 2% cash in lieu or 5% land dedication. As I mentioned, is consistent within the subdivision bylaw.
Yep, thank you, Ola. So just touching on kind of what the next steps are. So that's a very kind of high-level summary of the major topics that have changed from draft 1 to draft 2. There are obviously other changes, which we're happy to chat about. But the kind of next big piece here would be a series of public engagement events and then approvals process. So that's generally kind of where we are. So draft 2 now is a public document. We're looking for some of that feedback. And then we will move into that public engagement kind of just starting this Thursday. So maybe we get to jump to the schedule there. So we've got kind of 4 community events. So we've got La Have coming up this week. Then we have New Germany. Then we have Northfield, and then Big Ten Cook Island. So those are the community events. We also are doing for 3 kind of weeks in a row, drop-in type of event out in open house style here in council chambers. Similar to, if you would remember what happened last year when we did some engagement, very similar kind of format to those, but we're adjusting the timeline a little bit so that we can capture some afternoon folks as well as people in the evening, maybe once they're done work. So extending that until 7. And then, of course, we've got an open house virtual one as well, just for people that maybe can't come to something in person. And we'll, of course, record that and then have that posted online if people want to watch it later as well. So that's kind of the schedule, for, thank you, the engagement coming up. This kind of outlines what our kind of proposed work plan is for the next steps. So after that public engagement process, what we'll aim to do is take not nearly as amount of it wouldn't be nearly the same amount of feedback in terms of evaluating that and putting that into a what we heard report as last time. What we're picturing is this is a summary document that just outlines anything that we've heard throughout this process and provides recommendations to anything that makes sense from the planning perspective, or things that we would recommend changes as final edits to these documents as a result of that. And that would be presented, what our hope is to present that to the Planning Advisory Committee, and that they would then be able to provide a recommendation that can go next to council. And at that council meeting in May is when we would hope that council could then receive the report, recommendations from PAC, and then provide us that final direction. So it would be after that May meeting when we would create that final document, incorporating any edits that have come from engagement, recommendations from PAC, and then anything that council would like to continue to move forward with. And then those final steps would involve kind of that more formal bylaw adoption. So first reading, and we're targeting June for that. And then next steps would be a public hearing and second reading, which we would be targeting for July as well. So those just gives you a bit of an outline for what we're intending to do in the work plan that we're working with. But of course, we're happy to answer questions more detail about what that would involve as well. But other than that, that concludes the staff presentation for this evening.
Well, thank you. Before we open it to the public for comment, I want to, on behalf of council, thank you for your work. This has been a huge piece of work. And I having read it a number of times and gone through it and listened to council discussion, I think you really did capture, I think, what the public told us and also reflected what council input we provided during the 4 sessions that we held on the key topics. I think you've done an admirable job because it was daunting and in many respects. And I know for you folks who put your heart and soul into it, having to kind of start back at the beginning in some ways, it must have been difficult, and we'll acknowledge that. But thank you for the professionalism you've shown in coming forward and learning, listening again to what the public had to say and to what we had to say in terms of creating something that I think we can feel more comfortable in talking to the public about. And I think we also, as a group, collectively, staff and council, learned a lot about public engagement, the value of it, how it can work to our benefit, and how we can adapt to reflect what people really need to get from us as council, elected council, but also from staff in supporting the information that we put out. So I just want to commend you for that on behalf of council. So thank you. With that, we'll open it. If any of our PAC members who are in the gallery tonight as public members have questions, you're welcome to come forward and seek clarification on anything. You will have a number of times to do this, but if you had something tonight, you are welcome to ask those questions now if you'd like. Not game tonight. Okay. It is, there is a lot. And with that, we will then move to the council questions that may exist. And I see Councillor Moore is starting that first. And
thank you. And thank you again for the document. I know how much work you guys put into this and the phone calls and everything that we all received, and you guys probably received even more. Can you go back and explain to me about the RU2 and the division of farmland, how many parcels, how many times you can subdivide farmland? Yeah, can you go back and kind of review that for me? Because that's kind of where I'm having a hard time understanding.
If I may answer that. So in the rural agricultural potential zone, the R2 zone, subdivision would be limited to 2 subdivisions per year, up to a total of 6, like forever. So it would be so you could do 2 each year, up to 6, including the retainer lot.
So, may I?
Yeah.
So if there's a piece of farmland in Farmington, no pun intended. So, if they sell their farmland and to someone that wants to put in a residential subdivision, they can only put in 6 lots, no matter if it's 200 acres or not, or 300 or 400?
So you would be able to subdivide it.
Right.
2 times per year.
Right.
And then you could do that 3 more times,
3.
up to 6 lots total.
I'm not quite sure if I'm hoping that the public is listening. I'm hoping that they do come out for it, because I'm really not quite sure how a lot of people are thinking about this. If they think that that might need to be changed a little bit? Like, I don't know, and that's just one of the things I'm wondering. I'm hoping that we get some feedback about that from the public.
Sure. Yep. I guess what I'll add to that is what we've seen from other municipalities who have done this process recently is that this is one of those more challenging policies. It is a provincial requirement statement of interest to protect agricultural lands. And there are different ways in doing that. Limiting subdivision is one way. Other municipalities like Kings, where they have even better quality soils and there's more high density types of agriculture, they have things on limits to the types of uses, in addition to limits to the number of lots. So there, we've also seen in Pictou County where their plan was accepted, but then the province said, you didn't do enough to protect agricultural land and sent it back. So now they're working on that. We'll see where that lands in that municipality, but we know the province is going to require something on this. Whether 6 lots is the right number, or, you know, is there a different approach? I think that's a good question to ask. But what we tried to do here was be very flexible with the uses so that people can have different businesses and different types of dwellings and whatever they want to do. But because from our perspective, where we see that development pressure that's eating up farmland is from those bigger kind of subdivisions.
Right.
And this would then try to give people some flexibility to create some lots, but not allow the 20, 30 lot type of stuff to happen.
And I understand that we need to protect farmland, but I just want to make sure that the public understands it also.
And I will say that was a very common theme. That was one of the most common themes we heard was protect farmland. Now, when people say that, that's easy to roll off the tongue. So we know that in their heart they want that, but when you actually start to figure out how to do that, that gets complicated. And I think the planning folks have come up with really a soft touch on this in terms of giving quite a bit of flexibility, yet preserving recognizing that we need some restrictions in place. And I think the Pictou County example is, we shouldn't lose sight of that because it can get turned back, and it did. So we'll continue with Councillor Bell.
Thank you. We agreed to allow home-based businesses, and this is a three-part question on the same topic. So I'm a barber or a hairdresser. I'm an artist selling jewelry or whatever. We agreed that businesses can be located in any of the rural residential zones. That's what I understand. Okay, so part 2 and 3. I have my home located on an existing or new subdivision on a private homeowner's road. Do we allow the subdivision homeowners, road association, or contractor to put in covenances to regulate this? Or do we sit back and just wait to see what happens? I say that because in the homeowners associations, if they pay $200 a year for the road association, based on an individual living or family living in a house, as opposed to suddenly someone wants to run a business out of their house, the traffic could be non-proportional based to the other existing houses. How do we get around that without being drawn into it?
Yep, just to try to answer your question, so you're correct that what this draft 2 proposes is only really getting into limiting businesses and having home-based business regulations in that rural residential zone. So we're only talking about that zone. And in that example that you provided, if that was a private road, covenants would be registered separately. We don't have a role in what goes into those, nor do we have a role in enforcing them. So if somebody wants to create certain set of rules that says you have a business, you pay double the rate, they can go ahead and do that, but as a municipality, we wouldn't get involved in that. Now, draft 1 did introduce additional things that have been taken out from this draft that talked about limiting the types of home-based businesses on private roads to address that type of situation. But based on council's kind of direction, the second draft moved away from that to be a lot simpler and really basic on just controlling what the size of the business would be based on what the building code requirements are, and then just listing certain types of uses that would be kind of quite obnoxious or things like that for a residential community, but basically not going any further than that.
And my question is continued on the same topic. So the covenants that subdivision have on need to be the responsibility of the seller or the developer of the land. Do we need to identify that anyways? And I'll give you an example, something that we went through for about 4 years, where an individual in a subdivision with covenants ended up having a building, you'll know what I'm talking about, fed by extension cords from an existing property. Now, somehow they tried to make that a municipal enforcement issue, and really it was the developer who had covenants in, but he didn't want to pay for the lawyer. He said the municipality could pay for the lawyer. So I want to make sure that we don't get drawn into a situation like that, because what came into question was the type of building, the type of electrical wiring, plus I think the sewage was even involved into it. So they tried to bring it into council here to make us make a ruling onto it. It has since gone away because I think the building has been sold. But it went over 4 years. I don't know if that was before you come, Tom, or not, but I'm sure that there's people in the planning can certainly attest to what I'm talking about.
I guess from a planning perspective, as I mentioned, we don't get involved with covenants that are registered, and I think around this table before it's been mentioned that if somebody has an issue with something that's a covenant, then they have to hire the lawyer and go after that neighbor or whatever it is in order to sort that out as a civil matter. From our perspective, if there are issues that council basically deems to be important things that the municipality should be involved in, zoning is a good way to do that. And what zoning does is tells everybody up front what the rules are. It's a lot more publicly accessible than things that are registered on title like covenants, and it does involve the municipality. So there's certain things where, as planners, we would say it's worth getting involved so that the rules are quite clear to the public, and then also that they understand what the consequences are when they break them. But it really is up to council about how you want to weigh that type of issue, because I think in draft 1, there was that ability, whereas the direction that council had given us was no, pull back on that. But again, it is really kind of council's purview as to how far you want to go with that, and whether that's something you want to see in zoning, or if that's something you want to leave to the community members.
And my final part on that. So with the existing wording that you have, I think that if you added 4 words to that sentence that said, except where there are covenants, meaning we didn't put them in place, but we're at least recognizing that a developer has the ability to do that and then change our intent. And I think it gets us clear, because we're saying, if you do it, we're not saying you can't, but the covenant by the developer does. Then your argument is with him. So I'm just suggesting maybe 4 words on that one sentence.
Yeah, we can certainly take that back and see what we could maybe do with it, for sure. Yep.
Councillor Hoopley is next, then Deputy Mayor Vino, and then Councillor Smith.
Thank you. In District 4, we have a campground that was never used as a campground. There's been a few lots that have been numbered. The campground site the sign went up to book your lot, but it has never been used as a campground. How is that going to work? Because I can see at some point they're going to come to us and say, well, it was a campground, but it's not. What are we going to do?
Yep, so that's a question that's going to come up a lot when these new planning regulations come into play. What happens when we get that application to come in is our development officers will ask whether it was pre-existing or not, and that's what that question is really about. It could involve a lot of things, but it's up to the applicant to demonstrate that the use was in place prior to the bylaw being in effect. Sometimes that can involve it could be a legal question for them to demonstrate that. So it's not something that you could say black and white. As you mentioned, there seems like you would have situations where maybe it looked like it was in use, or there are certain things about it, like signage or other things that would say this business is operating. But as you mentioned, there might be some other things where it's not. And so there's definitely a gray area there. But the development officers have to be able to make a clear determination that that use was in place prior to the bylaw being passed. And if not, if that is determined to have not been in place, and whether it's a campground or a retail store or whatever it is, wasn't actually operating, then there's certainly a pathway for them. There's a development agreement process that they could follow. Under the draft 2 would suggest if you're in a rural area, you can go through a development agreement. There's a public process, et cetera, but they could still get that permitted, although it would have to go through the DA. So yeah, kind of site specific, but we're going to have certainly lots of those types of questions coming up.
Deputy Mayor Vino.
Thank you. I have 2 items that I wanted to bring forward. The first is around agricultural land protection, similar to Councillor Moore's point earlier. And just had a few notes I wanted to share. I understand the intent behind the statement of provincial interest as it relates to agricultural land. Protecting farmland and supporting agriculture is important to many in our communities, and I think that everyone around this table values that as well. My concern is with the limitation that would restrict farmland subdivisions to 2 a year up to 6 times, if I'm understanding how that works correctly. In rural municipalities like ours, farmland is often multi-generational property. Families sometimes need flexibility to divide land between children or for housing, which is also a statement of provincial interest. There's also the potential that the next generation of land that is passed on has no want or need to use the land for agricultural purposes. So I have a hard time getting support in this one, as they might want to sell for financial reasons. The other one I wanted to bring forward was the 90 days living in a RV. I did get some feedback on that, and the general consensus is they'd like to see it more aligned with campground dates, which is the May holiday weekend to the October holiday weekend. As the users that reach out to me, that's when they move to live in their campground. So it tends to be longer than 90 days, which when we originally had the conversation, I think I actually brought up the 90 days, but then I got to thinking, there's people that do the holiday weekend to the holiday weekend, so maybe looking at doing what campgrounds do and having a similar timeline for those that want to live in an RV, and then they would move back to their primary residence for the rest of the time if we're looking to make sure those that use RVs for seasonal purposes aren't having to get a permit when they go back to another home. That's just the feedback I wanted to share tonight. Thank you.
We can take that back.
Yeah, and just to further that, I remember that conversation well because, and I thought 90 days didn't really reflect what the conversation was, that we were trying to capture the full, what people generally have for a camping season, which 90 days seemed a bit short. Like it might look more like 120 days or 150 days. So I guess that's something that I would just reinforce what the Deputy Mayor is saying, that the conversation, I think, was more, as she has outlined, looking at the season as opposed to the 90 days, I think, is only 3 months. And we all hope for longer camping seasons than that. So
I could just speak to the comment you made about agricultural land and just raise another policy that we don't often bring up, but there's no kind of getting around the challenges that individual farmland owners have, and passing land down or trying to get out of the business, and how to retire, different things like that, and then the challenges with what they have a lot of land, but it doesn't mean they have a lot of money. And it doesn't mean that there's lots of people lining up to get into the business either. So we certainly understand that. At the same time, the province's policy requirements aren't about individuals. It's a long-term looking thing about protection of the land for future generations. And unfortunately, it would be nice if the province had accompanying ways that they could help people accomplish those aims through helping people. And so I certainly think there's work to do there. But if farmers are looking at dividing up land to be continued to be used for farming, there is a policy here that gives a bit of an exception to that, so that the rule about the two, so a total of 6 lots, that's really aimed at limiting the amount of subdivision type of development for new homes that we see. If somebody's looking to maybe take 100 acres and split it in half, and one goes to one family member and the other goes to the other, there's a policy here that says that there's no limit to lots that are intended to be used for agricultural purposes, provided that they are a decent size. I think it's 4 hectares. And that's to reflect the need that people may have within their family, or passing things down, or for financial reasons need to separate lands and continue to farm them. So I just wanted to flag that there is that ability there as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And just on that, one of the conversations that we had at one of the meetings talked about the demand for farmland now from the Annapolis Valley, farmers in the valley looking for land. I think in the future this may become a reality, even though our land here isn't class 1 or class 2 as you'll find in the valley. But there are certainly crops that can grow very successfully here. And because of the pressures in the valley and the actual value of our farmland here relative to what farmland per acre is in the valley, this area is very close. And so there are perhaps unknown opportunities here that we have not thought of in the past. So I just wanted to add that, to make sure that people recognize that there are people outside our area that may very much see the farmland here as opportunity, as farmland, in a way that we haven't in the past. Councillor Smith.
I was wondering if you could go back to the zoning map. I just wanted to point out right away before I get any calls, there's no rural agriculture potential zone in Farmington. Which I know that Councillor Moore raised that as a hypothetical, but there's none of that in Farmington. But there is a decent amount in District 6, and I do want to, as other people are saying, just really encouraging residents to look at the map, because it has nothing to do with whether your land is farmed at the moment or not. It's about the soil. So you could even have a property that's fully forested and it's class 3 soil. So I just wanted to point out while there is none in Farmington, there's lots in the Cornwalls, there's lots in Upper Northfield. And, I have had conversations with residents about this zone in the past, and by and large, I've found people support it, and if anything, they want more. But I have been concerned all along this process that people don't actually realize that they're falling into that zone. So that's just a comment. But my question is, or rather, if I could just get an explanation for residents who are in a rural residential zone. I have many of these little communities that would have been in Lakeshore residential. So I was wondering if you could just take a minute to explain what's the difference now that they're in rural residential as opposed to Lakeshore? Is there any way that they should read the land use plan a little bit differently since we changed up the zones?
If I may answer. So a big thing with the big difference, I guess, with the Lakeshore residential zone and the rural residential zone is that the density that the Lakeshore zone intended to limit. So in draft 1, I believe it was up to 2 residential units permitted on a lakeshore or on a property that's zoned Lakeshore residential. With the rural residential zone, that density limit isn't there. So it's more, it permits more density. Another big thing is that the Lakeshore residential zone of draft 1 would have applied to the entire lake, where now it would be just the residential areas of that lake. So the other half of the lake, if one side is developed, it could be rural residential, and then the other side could just be rural general or whatever, rural agricultural potential, whatever that zone is. So it's a bit more lenient in terms of like looking at the lake as a whole. But it would be more about looking at the permitted uses table. It is more restrictive, the rural residential zone is, in terms of uses compared to the rural general zone, because it's trying to achieve limiting the potential for nuisances or certain types of uses that may not be compatible within residential neighborhoods. So that's the big thing, is just like the uses that would be permitted or not, and you can find all of that in the permitted uses table.
And I guess just for the public, if they're reading the municipal planning strategy, the rural residential zone is on page 89.
And anything else, Councillor Smith? No? Okay, Councillor Oikle.
Just in line with what Deputy Mayor Vino and Councillor Moore was talking about regarding the rural agricultural zone. So if a person divides the land and they sell part of it, cannot that person who bought it now divide theirs?
No.
No,
No,
they can't.
it doesn't.
They have to keep it the way it is.
Doesn't matter who owns it, yeah.
And for eternity.
That's correct.
There is no
Now, this plan
time
can change. So a future council or in future years, somebody could make a change and say, we're going to increase that number or decrease it or whatnot, yeah.
But they could, if it was large enough parcel, use it as bare land condominium type, or put on a private road and put a bunch of houses.
So
that way,
yeah, that's
right?
a good question. So private roads, no. So this plan would say no private roads, but it doesn't have the ability to really limit cluster developments. I don't think that so there isn't a cluster development limitation in that same way.
Councillor Brooks.
This may be more for when we gather for policy and strategy, but on the agricultural land conservation, I had mentioned this when we brought this up at another time, and I think that certainly having the province dictate some of this conservation and us trying to find some ways to conserve are both valid. I think that we as a municipality should really try to consider even a voluntary agricultural lands database, because to the mayor's point, as our land becomes more valuable to others in the province who want to continue agriculture, let's plan for legacy. Instead of just trying to like figure out how we're going to avoid it being turned into a development, let's try to put these parties together. So if we slowly, and especially if it's a voluntary thing by farmers who want to see their land continue as farmland, seems like a very low effort thing that we could do to ultimately compile a list of viable agricultural land, and someone comes into our community, we're looking to be a farmer. Well, we have a list and we have some people who are about to transition out of the business, and maybe we can put you together. So maybe a conversation for another time, but on this point, I hope it's something that we think about.
Other questions from councillors? Councillor Moore.
Thank you. So now we're going back, my question is going back to the rural village zone, because apparently I'm lucky enough to have one of those in my district. And I'm glad you changed the name to that instead of Hamlet, because I could just see swords and houses and shields. And anyway, go put a little fun in this. When it comes to rural village zones, retail stores, it says less than 500 meters, and then between 501 and 2,000, greater than 2,000 square meters is not permitted.
Yep, okay, so I'm just looking, page 77 of the, so
Yep.
we're looking at a permitted uses
Yep.
table there. Yep, yep.
So when you, the boundaries, and I can't tell on this map, but are the boundaries for the rural village zone, are they from one sign that says, "Welcome to New Germany," to the next sign that says Meisner section if you're going to Trunk 10? Or is it just, is it sign to sign, or, like, by this, it looks like it's the Hamlet Rural Village Zone stops before it even gets to the next community.
Yeah, I find, I would want to look at a map to give you an exact answer on
Yeah.
that. But yeah, like, and those are the types of like input as well, that in this part of the engagement process is very, very helpful.
Yeah.
So if we didn't get it right along what those edges are,
Mhm.
the input on that
Mhm.
for what people in New Germany want in terms of where they see the edge.
Yes.
And where they see
Yeah.
the beginning starting, that's very, very helpful.
I think that's going to be something you're going to see at the open house there, because, I mean, if you're going from the New Germany community and you're going up the Trunk 10 and towards Middleton, once you get to your next community, there's a lot of space in there that this really would not pertain to. But for the core area of, say, the sewer, people that's hooked into the sewer, people that have the streetlights in New Germany, yeah, that kind of area, I can see that, but not if it's going to one community sign to another. Thank you.
That's a really good point, and I encourage our planning staff in the little time that we give for a presentation that you really emphasize the need to really get input on where the boundaries are, because the people who live in those villages know best where those lines are. And I know that to be the case in Petite. I know Councillor Reinhardt and I have had communication with somebody down there that was very concerned about where those lines would be, and also for La Have as well. So people really, La Have is probably the easiest one to define, but some of the others, the people will tell us where those are.
Yeah, just to add to that, just to speak to their engagement process, at those open houses, we'll have great big maps on tables, and we'll be encouraging people to show us, draw on those maps and see, like, from their perspective, this is where things should start and stop, and that kind of input's very helpful.
Other questions on this? Well, this is, Councillor Reinhardt.
Could you remind me what happens to the lawfully existing uses if the property is sold or inherited?
It keeps on being a lawfully existing property. The grandfathering clause is to the property and not to the property owner.
Any other questions? I know there will be in time, but this is really the launch of the next round. Releasing it was step one. Now it's very public because we are having a public conversation about it. And with the meeting this week, we'll have our first session of feedback from the public and people really starting to dig into the maps and see where their place is and where it fits into this great scheme of our municipal planning strategy. So I think with that, we'll conclude this part of the discussion, unless I just want to make sure we've got all the questions answered that we need for tonight. and I'm not seeing anyone jumping up and down to say we're not. So we will, we'll move on from that. So thank you very much. We will move to 11.1.4, which is the pre-budget approval on Lunenburg County Wheels, and Councillor Oikel will remove herself from the council table for this discussion. And I'm not sure who's going to speak. Mr. Merrill.
Thank you. Good evening. Just give me 1 second to jump to that page. So on at your February 24th meeting, Lunenburg County Wheels came in and gave a presentation to council on their ridership, provide some ridership information and their operational updates. You know, the information they shared, their data demonstrates a sustained and growing demand for accessible community-based transportation across Lunenburg County West. I would point out that Lunenburg County Wheels covers the whole western part of Lunenburg County. Some of they outline some operational updates, which you know, contributes to an additional need for municipal support, including the ongoing exploration of expanded service hours, including the potential a potential Saturday service and a charter out of region service. They identified some labor pressures, particularly around the challenge of recruiting volunteer drivers. Lunenburg County Wheels has made a request to the municipality to increase our funding level by $15,000. So this would bring the total contribution to $90,000 for the 2026-2027 fiscal year, and that amount is in your draft budget currently. So there is a motion for council's consideration, and staff are recommending that council approve the full funding request to support Lunenburg County Wheels in continuing to provide that essential service.
Thank you. We did have a presentation from Lunenburg County Wheels at one of our recent meetings. Would someone put the motion on the floor, please, related to this? Councillor Brooks, thank you.
To Mayor McLean, Weil, and members of council, I move that the Municipal Council grant pre-budget approval for an increase of $15,000 to Lunenburg County Wheels annual municipal funding for a total contribution of $90,000 for the 2026-2027 fiscal year, and further, that the approved funds be released immediately to ensure that there is no interruption to the essential community that transportation services provided by the Lunenburg County Wheels.
And it's seconded by Councillor Hubley. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Brooks and then Councillor Smith.
I'm just going to say my transit piece, if it was doubled, I would support that too. So I want to see these folks really succeed. I think we're going to come up against something that we're facing now, which is struggling to find volunteer drivers for public transit. It won't be a conversation tonight, but we're going to have a conversation at some point about longer term sustainability. These men and women who are running this thing are doing so out of the kindness of their heart. And they're doing yeoman's work, but we're going to need to find a longer term solution to this at some point.
Councillor Smith.
I'm very supportive of funding, giving additional funds to Lunenburg County Wheels. However, I am a bit concerned about access to the service in some of the more rural areas, and we did talk about that when they presented. And so just putting it out there that I would like to work on how we improve that, because you know, when my residents say that they can't access the service for medical appointments, it's, yeah, it's very difficult to know what to say. And I know that we're growing the service, but at that presentation, there was an offer to work with counselors on maybe working on some ideas to get more people to get group rides together, so that they could maximize those longer rides when they come out, say to like Parkdale, Maplewood area. So I really want to work on that going forward, and any staff help or ideas would be appreciated. I'm not asking for a report, just some brainstorming, and maybe if other counselors have some ideas as well, because that was put out there by Lunenburg County Wheels. And I think it's important, especially as we're building out, we're putting a lot of money as well into building out bus service in areas right around Bridgewater, that we also work to make this work for our other residents as well.
Just remind councillors to, with motions, to stick to the motion. And I think the issue you're raising is for another conversation about how we can look at community development and how we focus on that. So the motion is around the funding and approval for that. So is there any other discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor signify by raising their hands. Motion is carried. And I would suggest on the discussion about how we offer some support to them, that's a conversation we need to think about for those outlined, because I think the question New Germany, I think Kathy Moore raised that as an issue. You've raised it, so I think bringing those couple of areas together to talk with Lunenburg Wheels might be a good first step to see how they might accommodate it. So let's move on the agenda to our next item, which is the cost share agreement on J-class roads. Favorite subject.
Yes, so thank you, Mayor. So once again, it's time for the municipality to sign the 3-year cost share agreement for subdivision streets. So this is the agreement by which the province and the municipalities partner in the paving of J-class roads. The current agreement expires on March 31st, 2027, and they've asked us to have the new document signed before July 3rd, 2026. So we're way ahead of schedule, but we wanted to get this done and get it in, and so it's taken care of. The standard agreement, there's no change in the terms as they've been presented. So the recommendation that we're making is municipal council authorize the mayor and municipal clerk to sign the cost sharing agreement number 2026-015 with the Nova Scotia Department of Public Works for the paving of subdivision J-class streets for a 3-year term.
Someone make the motion? Councillor Bell, please.
Where the CIO has read the motion, you want me to read it again?
For the record, yes, please.
To Mayor McLean-Weil and MODL councillors, I move that municipal council authorize the mayor and municipal clerk to sign the cost-sharing agreement number 2026-015 with the Nova Scotia Department of Public Works for the paving of subdivision J-class streets for a 3-year term. I so move.
And a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Deputy Mayor Vino. Is there a discussion on the motion? Councillor Brooks and then Councillor Burns.
Through the chair to Tom. Tom, can you tell us, do we have a number for that, or is that just whatever it ends up being, we split the cost? Is that how it?
So the process is the province budgets $2 million for all of the J-class road improvements in the province. We submit a list. Each municipality that wants to take part, you're not required to take part, but if you want to take part, You submit your list, the province reviews it, and then picks which ones they're prepared to pave. They give you first a cost estimate, which council has to approve. Then they take that and go out to tender. And if it's over 10%, the estimate, then they come back and get council to approve it again, and then it eventually gets paid. But the costs aren't known on the individual roads until the tenders come in.
And just to clarify, I think last year they accepted none of ours. Is that correct?
Yes, last year they accepted none.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Burns.
Thank you. Through the chair to Tom. My question really is just for anyone who's listening who might not understand the complexity of J-class roads or would have a concern about them. I guess my question is, by not signing this agreement or signing this agreement, it does not change anything about the service exchange that started in the 90s and does not change the framework in which any of these J-class roads would be done. This is, by signing this agreement, it just maintains the status quo, and there's really nothing we can do to change about it. This is just whether we want any of our J-class roads to have paving possibly in the next 3 years. It would not change the costs, what roads can be included, or anything else. There's nothing about the framework that changes. It would not affect Nogler Road in any way. It would simply be, would we like to be a part of the framework that exists for the next 3 years?
Yes, that's correct. As long as we sign, we're eligible to take part in the cost sharing program. If we do not sign, we are not eligible to take part.
Thank you.
No, I'm not. All those in favor signify by raising their hands. I'm just thinking about those roads. Motion is carried unanimously. 11.2.2, which is a request we received from the Central Nova ATV Club and the LaHave River Trail Association Partnership, which I hope you've read, and it is identifying a section of road in the Pinehurst area, Pinehurst-Wenzel Lake area, which the request is that this would allow, basically legally, ATVs to travel on the road under a piece of legislation that all of a sudden I can't remember the name of it. Road Trail Act. And the request has come forward for us to write a letter of support for this to happen. And I think there are areas in the New Germany area that are covered by this piece of legislation and other areas in the county. The request has come to us, and I'm going to a meeting Wednesday night in Northfield about this. And I wanted to make sure we had a conversation here before I went to that meeting. And we also have the request for a letter of support. So at this point, I'll just open it up for discussion. I don't know, do you want to make any comment, Tom, on it? Okay.
So this is legislation that was introduced by the province, which would allow for off-highway vehicles, provided that they're registered and insured, to operate on public highways in certain designated areas. It is not an initiative that can be approved by the municipality. It's an initiative that has to be approved by the province. And in this instance, it is not the municipality that's making the request, but a trail group. And this is, they're asking for the municipal council to write a letter of support, which they would submit to the province as part of their application, in the hopes that the section of road that they wish to be designated would be designated under the Road Trails Act.
And in that area, there is a section of the road that the trail is broken, and this is a way of partly accommodating that. I just add that as another piece of information. So we'll open it up for a little bit of discussion and sense from the council as to your willingness to write a letter of support or not, as the council may choose. Councillor Brooks.
Through the chair to Councillor Moore, can you tell us a little bit about what that's been like in your district, having this? Have you had any concerns or problems with that, or has it been pretty smooth?
Yes, it's been very smooth. Most people that do use that section they use it to go to the Irving to gas up, because there was no gas stations between New Germany and the valley, unless you go the back way through, yeah, you know what I mean, the Woodsman and all that back there. I find, if I can continue, I find that it's used, but it's not misused. And people know they can go on it, so they're not racing to get over it before someone calls the cops. And this is what's happening in the Pinehurst area. People they're using it now. They're using the road now, and they're using it fast because people, you're always going to get you ones that's going to not go by the rules. And right now, they can, if they go along idling quite slow, and the cops are not, they already told us, the cops are not going to pull them over if they're doing just to get from one point to the other. So I'm hoping that making this legal, that the ATVers and users of recreation vehicles will say, okay, we're lucky enough to have this, let's use it properly, let's not, make a big noise, we'll just go from point A to point B so that we can get back on the rest of the trail. Okay.
There is another spot in New Germany that you're allowed on the road, and it's from the railroad bed down to the Irving, and no one abuses it.
That's what I just said.
Oh, that's the one? Yeah. Oh, okay, I thought you were speaking of a different one. I used the trail, and they are driving crazy to get through that area. It's dangerous not allowing them to use it. And it brings a lot of people into the Best Western and to Boston Pizza. It brings a lot of business to this area right here.
More quickly, and I understand, because I get calls about this too, and I see posts that people are upset that, these vehicles are going on the road. But the trail, parts of the trail that go on private property that could connect this, the private property owners don't want them to use that part, and I understand that too. I understand that when it's tinder dry, who wants people out, getting off their ATVs or their side-by-sides and having a smoke and that kind of stuff when it's tinder dry in August and whatever. So I understand this. So I think this maybe is a way of trying to work with everybody, and it's legal, and hopefully people will respect it and go from there.
I just have a couple questions around exactly where it is. I think I can picture it. What the speed limit is in that area, because I think that's the difference between right in the hamlet or village of New Germany, because the traffic kind of goes along together because everybody's going at about the same speed. So on Highway 10, people really do speed on that highway. So that's one of the things that I'm taking into consideration. But I imagine that the province has very particular rules around where these roadways can be permitted. But I absolutely do support finding a solution here, and one that kind of makes a legal solution as opposed to what's happening now, which is unsafe. But I feel like I don't have enough information is the question, do we support it? And then the province regulates it? The province actually decides whether it can be approved or not? I would say I would support it if the province finds it to be safe and manageable.
They make the determination. So, and in that area, it's 70 and 80, as you know, but it's also a flat, straight stretch through there, and you're right, the traffic is fast. Are there other comments? Oh, sorry, Councillor Burns.
I just wanted to share my support for this. I think it's a fantastic idea. There's two really big broken spots of the trail there. One is this area, and one is right in front of my house. And in both spots, you will have People use the roadway because there is no other option. Otherwise, the section of trail between those two broken spots is not usable by these recreation vehicles. And frankly, it's provincial infrastructure the whole way along, whether it's those trails or whether it's the roads. And so the reason that it's not connected is because in the late 80s and 90s, the province sold off chunks of land to individual landowners from the rail bed that became the trail. So that problem was created. You can't just go take back they can through expropriation. They're not going to go back and take back the land. Therefore, we need to come up with a safe alternative. And whether it's there, that spot, I hope one day they eventually find a solution in front of my house so people can go there safely as well. And at the end of the day, the incredible outpouring of support for our trail system from users who both walk and people who use these recreation vehicles. During the most recent campaign, I was incredibly surprised by when you talk about investments in parks and trails, that people talk about making it safer for ATVs and everyone else to coexist. So for me, this is a no-brainer that as a council, if the groups are coming forward and saying we want a safer environment to take the actions we're already taking and that people are using, then I think as a council, it's a no-brainer that we would support that.
Okay, Councillor Bell, and then I'm just going to ask for a straw show of hands on this, just so we'll have direction as to writing, whether we write the letter or not. We have a motion. We have a motion. Okay, that's fine. Councillor Bell.
My comments is what Councillor Burns said.
Would you like to make the motion?
To Mayor McLean-Weil and members of MODL Council, I move that Municipal Council write a letter of support for Central Nova ATV Club and the LaHaye River Trail Association's application for a shared use rail trail designation for a defined section of Highway 10 between Wenzel Lake and Pinehurst under the Nova Scotia's Road Trails Act. I so move.
Seconded by Councillor Burns. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by raising their hands. Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone. The last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of legislation tabled, and we're fortunate enough to have legal advice at my left hand here, who has scoured through much of the legislation looking for the implications for our particular area and for rural communities. And the conservation easement and forest property taxation legislation has some implications that we wanted to bring forward. So Tom, maybe you can give us a little briefing on that.
Yep, thank you, Mayor. So included in your package is just some updates on the Financial Measures to 2026 Act, which is currently in the House. The impact that we've identified is on the Conservation Easement Act, which is particularly important to MODL because we have just recently entered into a conservation easement with the Nature Trust. And so they contacted us and asked us to support their efforts to indicate to the province that this change is not supported by what's called the eligible bodies in the legislation. So those are the bodies that are entitled to hold conservation easements. So the biggest change that's been put in place by the proposed amendments that are introduced as part of the Financial Measures Act is to allow the owners to apply to terminate the conservation easement. So one of the hallmarks of the conservation easement as it currently stands under the Conservation Easement Act is it's in perpetuity. It's intended to last for as long as you have an eligible body to hold the conservation easement, and if there's no eligible bodies left, then the province can hold it. And only if there's no eligible bodies left that are interested and the province passes would the easement come to an end. For reasons that haven't been explained in any great detail, the province has introduced an ability in the Financial Measures Act of 2026 for the owners to apply to terminate the conservation easement. So the proposed revisions give the option for an owner to make application to the Nova Scotia Supreme Court for the termination of a conservation easement, an option that doesn't currently exist. In order to be successful in the application, the owner would have to satisfy the court that the continuation of the easement would produce a severe hardship. The owner would also be able to make application to the Nova Scotia Supreme Court for the termination of the conservation easement if the easement holder ceases to exist. So there's two components here. I'll deal with the second one first. Under the current system, if the easement holder ceases to exist, the province is notified and all eligible bodies in the province are given the option to take that conservation easement, and then they give notice to the owner. So the proposal here is, if the easement holder ceases to exist, the owner of the land could then apply to terminate the conservation easement. So it's a significant change just on the termination of the eligible body. But even beyond that, it allows the owner to make an application to the Nova Scotia Supreme Court to terminate an easement while the eligible body still exists and holds that easement, on the grounds that it would produce a severe hardship. Now, in the Act, they don't define severe hardship. It's likely that that would be defined in the regulations. But that's the language that they use. It's not undue hardship, it's severe hardship. So that the indication would seem to be that it's a high threshold, but they don't put any parameters on it. So is it an economic threshold? If it is an economic threshold, what could it be?
Like not to build a golf course?
It could be. So this may be targeted for a particular area of the province, but they didn't limit it. It applies to all conservation easements. And we spent, and Trudy could probably tell you, but I'm sure it was years and years and maybe decades trying to get the conservation easement for the Cape Lehave Islands in place. And not that MODL would make an application to terminate, but the whole system is built on the idea that once the property goes into a conservation easement, it's in perpetuity. And as long as there's an eligible body that's prepared to take that easement, it will continue to exist. So it's a whole-scale change into the entire system. And it's something that Council, one, should be aware of because it was introduced in legislation that you wouldn't think would apply to conservation easements because it's called the Financial Measures Act. But it actually impacts some 20 pieces of legislation. There's a mirror provision going in the Community Easement Act. So it's the same system, the same type of thing. They're removing the current language and putting in the application of the owner to terminate. So that's the first one. The second one is a little more nuanced. So the Forests Act is also proposed to be amended by the Financial Measures 2026 Act. So they've created a new section, and it's section 15A, proposed to be added to the Forest Act, which addresses the issue of commercial carbon sequestration transactions. So the provisions provide that an owner of a forest property that is being used in a commercial carbon sequestration transaction shall file with the minister a report that contains some information. But what it's doing, and the deputy minister explained during an NSFM Teams meeting, they've identified that foreign interests are investing or purchasing carbon sequestration, and they're using it for the benefit of entities out of the province and out of the country. So the proposal that the deputy minister suggested is it was not aimed at small family forest holdings, but at commercial transactions that are out of province and out of country. And it would trigger a couple of things. One, it would change the taxation. It would go from forestry to a change in use, likely to commercial. And then it would be assessed as commercial and pay tax on commercial. So that would be a change. But the language that they've put in place doesn't state that it only applies to out of province or out of country commercial transactions. It applies to all commercial transactions for carbon sequestration. So at a time when you would think that that's something to be encouraged, they're looking to make a modification to how in particular municipal taxation would apply. So again, it's something that was done with very little input and possibly no input from municipalities. It wasn't something that was on anyone's radar that I can think of. It's not something that the NSFM was looking for, but it was introduced and it is making its way through. There has been some indication that there may be some willingness to change from the province, but I was watching as late as this afternoon, and it doesn't seem to be that any changes are being initiated yet. Although having said that, the Premier announced that budget cuts, which were announced for a whole host of organizations, are now not going to happen. So it's so at least that there's some sense that there can be a change from what they've stated. But these are two areas that we wanted to bring to Council's attention to see if there is interest on Council's behalf to write to the province in support of, one, the Nova Scotia Nature's Trust, but generally in conservation easements generally, and the forest industry, because there's considerable forest interests in MODL, and there doesn't seem to have been a lot of input sought from the forest industry on what impact this could have on particularly small family forest businesses. So we put together the note, put it out for Council. We know it's a tight timeline because these things are going through first reading, second reading, Public Bills Committee, third reading, Royal Assent, all in a very quick time frame. So we wanted to take advantage of the Council meeting this evening, put it in front of Council, have a discussion, see if the Council wants to do anything, and if you do, we would put a quick turnaround on the letter. And I think the Nature Trust actually has provided us with a fairly detailed draft letter that we just have to modify slightly if Council's in favor of doing that.
Councillor Smith.
I also wanted to point out that we had a presentation a few weeks ago from the Nova Scotia Working Woodlands Trust. That's a mouthful. And, you know, their model depends on, you know, people putting, they hold easements for property owners, and the idea is that it's held in perpetuity for ecological forestry. And then there's also this part of the model is that they are pooling properties together. They're not huge properties, but together they can pool them and draw some income from carbon sequestration. So this kind of gets, you know, undermines their model in a couple different ways. And you know, one of my residents reached out to me and was quite upset that the easement that he's working on for his property may actually not be permanent, because someone could just, you know, the next property owner could go to the Supreme Court and say, you know, plead severe hardship, which we don't know what that means. So I am in support of writing a letter, if only just to say, you know, more consultation, please, with municipalities, but also to support not just the Nature Trust, but also other models for people to be managing their woodlots over time in a sustainable way. I think it's a really interesting model, and I feel like, you know, there was interest and support around this table, and they're just getting started, and I'd hate to see I'd hate to see us lose that at this point with hasty legislation.
Councillor Reinhardt.
Yeah, I'd like to speak a little bit to the conservation easement because I was involved in a lot of the discussion around Cape LaHave Island at the end. And one of the big questions that came up over and over from people in the community was, why are we doing this? The uses are going to basically be the same, like what is the point of this? And one of the answers that we gave them was that this will add an extra layer of protection in perpetuity. I said that many, many times, and I'm sure others did as well. And when people heard that, they were relieved. They were appreciative of that. So to see that somewhat get clawed back a little bit is disheartening, and I think that we should support the Nature Trust and the residents, as well as the residents that Councillor Smith mentioned.
Anyone else wishes to speak? I think just on the, if I might, on just the forestry property taxation issue on the sale of carbon credits. I don't mind if they're taxed with foreign entities buying our credits, but I don't think it should, that part of it, if they just identified foreign purchase, I wouldn't have any issue with it. But it does very much discourage the woodland program that we saw, and because the maintenance of the forest, of the woodland, and the management of it is contingent on the woodlot owner getting revenue from the sale of those credits to manage that woodlot in perpetuity. So that easement creates that box to work around, and the sale of the credits provides the revenue to manage the woodlot. So it's, there are some nuances here that both the easement and the sequestration question are really intertwined here. So I feel quite strongly that we should write a letter and because both of these were buried, and that's really unfortunate. And fortunately, we have people that were scouring through this and found it, and residents that also brought it to our attention as well. So I feel like we should respond. So I just ask for maybe, is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Councillor Bell?
I want to ask a question with regards to the conservation easement possible change. Does this mean if my name was Thompson or Irving and I wanted to really have a golf course on Cape LaHave, that the province could dissolve a section of that island and sell it to a family to have a golf course? Is this what I'm hearing?
Through the mayors, it's the owner of the land that can apply to terminate the easement. So it'd be more if years ago the named property owner, if it was Irving or Thompson, put their property into a conservation easement, believing it to be in perpetuity. This would allow them to terminate that conservation easement through a claim of severe hardship. And if they were successful, the conservation easement would be removed and they could use the property as they saw fit, subject to land use planning.
Could we just have a show of hands for the letters of support here? So we're unanimous, and we'll get those done in the next very short amount of time.
Sorry, can I just have a clarification? Who are we writing the letters to?
To the Premier and the Minister, the appropriate Minister. Yeah.
Okay.
We are now moving to the Mayor's Deputy Mayor, Councillor Matters, and MJSB, Councillor Oikel.
Yep. So we had a meeting on Wednesday, February the 25th. The third quarter financial update showed that all services were tracking in line with the approval of the 25-26 budget, and there was no significant financial concerns at that time. The board approved updating the company's TD Canadian Trust Bank account signing authorities to include the newly appointed Chief Operation Officer, Gillian Rafuse, and the board had a discussion on the sustainability of the MJSB's current office at 210 Aberdeen and the potential need to relocate, and more information will be given to the board. And that is my report.
Thank you. And Deputy Mayor Vino.
Thank you. Mine will be quick. I participated in agenda briefings, check signing, and all my other committee meetings as a side. And I'm not sure if it's the nice weather, but the last few days have been very busy as a councillor, as I'm sure all of you have heard things come in. So it's a very active time as a councillor.
And I would agree with that. It's like everyone woke up after the winters of hibernation. The last couple of weeks have been filled with difficult news. International conflicts continue to escalate, and we've seen announcements about provincial budget cuts. And here at home, we're working through challenging conversations around proposed fire service reform. When so much of this fills our news feeds every day, it can sometimes feel overwhelming. And I did feel last week just a heaviness on my shoulders for whatever reason. For me, the best response is to stay focused on the work that we can actually influence and move forward on here in our municipality. That doesn't mean ignoring the bigger issues happening around us, but it does mean putting our energy into the things we can help shape and improve for our own communities. Over the last 2 weeks, that work has taken a few different forms. Councillor Burns and I met with residents of Nagla Road, along with municipal staff and representatives from the Department of Public Works, to talk through concerns about road conditions in the area. These kinds of conversations are important in helping us understand local issues directly from residents. I also had the opportunity to tour the Flourish Plus 55 Centre in Bridgewater and meet with Executive Director Lisa LeBlanc and Board Chair Karen Fields. The centre offers more than 30 programs for seniors, and about 25% of their members come from the municipality. Like many community organizations, they are facing funding pressures, although the municipality does support their work through our operating grant program. It was impressive to see the range of programming they offer and the role they play in keeping people connected and active. In recent weeks, I've also met with several individuals in our community to talk about issues of inclusion and belonging. These conversations are helping me build a better understanding of the needs that exist locally and what role the municipality might play in supporting a more inclusive community. Another highlight for me was, as I said, was attending the iftar meal at the Hebville Fire Hall. This was an evening meal that breaks the daily fast during Ramadan in the Muslim tradition. It was a warm and welcoming gathering and a meaningful opportunity to learn more about the traditions of members of our community. I also met with representatives from the Riverport Electric Utility to learn more about the work they are doing on restructuring proposals aimed at addressing their capital needs and ensuring long-term sustainability. Councillor Reinhardt and Trudy Payne and I met with residents from Broad Cove and the surrounding area who are advocating for improvements near Artie's Pond, particularly around parking and safety for people accessing the beach for surfing and for using the beach. This builds on earlier advocacy by the group, which successfully secured a commitment from the Department of Public Works to undertake road repairs in the area this summer. I mentioned about the Atlantic Business Magazine dinner and recognizing Rita Casey, and I would like to, as Councillor Burns or Brooks mentioned, recognize the volunteers that organized the Repair Cafe, and I took something that got repaired, which I was delighted with. On Saturday evening, I attended the Michelin Bridgewater's International Women's Day celebration. This event is open to the public, and more than 200 people attended. It was a great evening of conversation, inspiring remarks, good food, and celebration for International Women's Day. Finally, I'm looking forward to the next couple of weeks as we begin meeting with residents through the upcoming sessions on the municipal planning strategy. These conversations are an important part of making sure our planning work reflects the voices and priorities of the community we serve and capture the direction we need to take in the district-wide planning strategy. So I know some of you will be joining those meetings, and I encourage the public to participate in those as well. We have no other business on our regular agenda, but we will need a motion to move in camera. So if I could have that, Councillor Oikel, seconded by Councillor Burns. All those in favor signify by raising their hands. Motion is carried unanimously. We will move in camera.